you're inspired by them and you think your kids will be inspired by them, it's very likely that that's the camp for you.
Welcome to Cabin Chat with Jack Schott, the podcast where Jack unpacks the power of camp with experts sharing insights on youth development, leadership, and lessons that shape kids today.
I'm Jack Schott, and in a second, you're going to get to hear a conversation I had with Sylvia Van Meerten, where she mostly peppered me with questions about why does camp matter? What's the impact that actually happens for kids at camp? Why is this generation of counselors the right people at the right time to take on the world? And how does self-determination theory change the way we think about what kids need today, tomorrow, and into the future?
Jack.
Sylvia.
I can't wait to ask you about summer camp. This is a topic that we both really care about, and you have made a stunning career out of summer camping, and I want to hear about it. Summer camp is like the healthiest place ever, the healthiest job ever, and you decided to make a career out of it, which a lot of people don't. So tell me, why did you decide to make a career out of summer camp? But first, why is it the healthiest place ever, the healthiest job ever?
So summer camp is the healthiest place on the planet, period, full stop. There's all these, health guru, experty type people, Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, Tim Ferriss, run around talking about how we need to take, 10,000 steps a day, and we need to get 30 minutes of sunshine within 30 minutes of waking up, and we need healthy friend groups where we can laugh, and we need to be active in these like micro energy bursts. It's like they're just describing summer camp. They're describing spending your time. They talk about like some version of meditation. It's like every camp has something built in that is like a reflective period that maybe it isn't exactly meditation, but it's like if you squint your eyes, these guys are describing summer camp. They're just
singing together with people improves your connectivity and happiness.
Right? Like I know you're always talking about entrainment and how we need to find ways to be connecting with each other on this like neurological level, and singing in unison, like singing together around a campfire. Literally, our hearts beat as one. And so, summer camp holds on to the kind of like ancient wisdom of sitting around the fire like our ancestors did, while also creating a place for play and kids to learn how to make decisions. And so it's like, it's both physically incredibly healthy environment, as well as psychologically like this incredible space where kids can connect with each other, feel excited, be able to dream. I talk about this all the time, where I have this belief that we are, as a society, both stealing kids' dreams, their ability to dream bigger, while also not giving them the practical ability to make impacts in their, like the school system is not designed in such a way that kids dream bigger or that they really get the most practical skills. And so we're in this weird middle ground, and camp is at least a place for the ability to dream big. And I would make the argument that it's a place where the skills that we truly need for most of us are developed in a camp space.
That reminds me of how you say all the time that enthusiasm is a skill. And you're also one of the most genuinely enthusiastic people I know, like in a way that I can actually tolerate, because I'm pretty sarcastic, kind of salty. I'm not into enthusiasm, like fake enthusiasm, but yours is real, and you talk about how it's a skill. Tell me more about that.
Enthusiasm is definitely a skill. Sometimes it's annoying, and I think it can be inspirational. So I just interviewed Seth Godin, and he talks about the difference between being authentic and being consistent. And he says authenticity is for amateurs, which I struggle with a little bit, because I'm like, wait a minute, we could be a little bit more authentic.
That used to be our through line,
but he's like, and I think we can mince the words however we want. But his point is basically that authenticity is for amateurs, because when you show up to a business, and camp is a business. Now we take care of kids and we connect with them in a real way, but I'm not going to cry to a 7-year-old about breaking up with my girlfriend or whatever. Like that is not the space. That is not the relationship that.
And if you don't feel like being nice to your team.
Yeah, I don't get to authentically be rude to an 8-year-old. It's just not, I don't get to do that because I'm a professional, right? So, and the camp staff are professionals, and we ask our 18-year-olds, our 20-year-olds to be professionals in this space, right? And to consistently show up in a way that makes the community better, makes the kids' lives better, and is real. Like, I don't want to ask an 18-year-old, and everyone can see through it when you show up and you like sort of like have like pretend spaghetti arms, and you're like whatever, and you're just being totally off the rails, inauthentic. Like, I'm not asking for that. However, when you walk into a room, if you walk into the room beforehand, you just like kind of shake out a little bit and put a smile on your face. Before you walk into the room, you can come into the room with some enthusiasm, right? Like Tony Robbins calls this "honey, I'm home" energy, right? Like if you think about like in the sitcoms from like the 50s or whatever that I didn't watch, like the way someone enters the room, the man comes home from work. It's always a man, blah, blah, blah. We can talk about that later. But the idea is he opens the door and he says, "Honey, I'm home." And that's real, but you have to do some practice to get that to be real. Like, and at camp, something that is true for me at camp is that I'm almost always tired. Just like that's
okay. We could apply that to a lot of workplaces.
Sleepaway camp is tiring. Work is tiring, right? And so what I want to do is be real, show up and be able to be loud and bring the energy when it's appropriate. And then also let the rest of the staff know, like, I'm tired. And this is, I am being real. I am really standing on the picnic table and jumping up and down and being excited. But also I'm tired because this is a job and I want to live up to it because it's important to me that the campers at camp have the experience that they're hoping for, which is full of growth and connection. And their kids are striving to find, they're looking so hard for adults that care about them and are inspirational.
I love that. And, you know, in some ways what you said has so much nuance to it because you're sort of making a demand that we raise our standards from either authentic or enthusiastic. And you're saying, okay, some of both. And I think that's a reasonable standard for this day and age. We've come a long way, and I think people can do it. And I think you know me well enough to know, like, I'm allergic to the like kindergarten teacher energy at the beginning of a meeting, at the even when talking to kids. And I'm not throwing it's the worst.
I'm not trying to say all kindergarten teachers, but when you picture a kindergarten teacher,
it's great when it's actually kindergartners.
And that's like it seems it's like you're not taking me seriously. And
yes.
And I think kids want to be taken seriously. And so like right now I'm enthusiastic, right? You can hear the enthusiasm in my voice. And it's not like fake in some way, but it is also, you're right. There is a nuance to this. And camp is a great place for that. I have not figured out how to totally teach this outside of camp. And you know this about me, that's why I keep going back to camp probably. But what is amazing about camp is that when you're a staff member at camp, you get to live in that space where the enthusiasm is contagious. And so when I show up and I bring this level of enthusiasm in a real authentic way, and when I connect with people, it's easy to see it. And then you're like, oh, you know, like I'm the combination of the 5 people I spend the most time with. And this is what like people like us do things like this at camp. And what happens is you just like sit up a little straighter and you bring the excitement. And when somebody talks to you, you like look them in the eye and you listen. And like, yes, we're going to do a ton of training for the staff, but the big training is living in that space. And that's what happens for kids. And you know this from sending your daughter to camp. It's like she comes home a little different. She stands up a little taller. Wait a minute. I want to hear from you. You love camp. You've worked at camp. We've worked at camp together.
Yeah.
We've run camp together. Why do you take the risk to send your daughter to camp?
Well, I believe that all immersive experiences can be life-changing. And I think that family is an immersive life experience that changes people. And for me, my life has been exponentially better from having immersive environments, multiple immersive environments throughout my development, so that I could really see what it's like to be fundamentally different. Who are all these people who behave like this? How does that work? The whole thing, not just like for an hour, but what is it like to live in that new way of being? And then how can I apply just a little taste of that in my regular life if I don't want to be all woo-woo campy all the time? So I send my daughter to camp because I want her to see what it's like to be a little different. I want her to watch people interface with each other in a different way. I want her to negotiate with other adults. I want her to negotiate with other kids. And I really want her to have let me see if I can describe this, almost like a social scaffolding that is healthier than school. And camp, I think, really does that. It gives this like social prompting, social scaffolding, almost like social mentoring that gives kids, my daughter, a new option on how to tell a friend that she doesn't want to do what her friend feels like doing. That's a big deal at 9 years old. You know, it divides people on the playground. She didn't want to play what I wanted to play. It can be heartbreaking. But at camp, you get to figure it out together with an adult. It's like you have a social partner in your counselor who can help you navigate it in a way that, and certainly in my childhood, was more unspoken. People weren't talking about social decision making. And social decision making is like the most impactful part of childhood. In a lot of ways, like what happens socially changes people's happiness overall. So I send her to camp because I want her to learn those skills in a safer place than school is, or safer than any of the other environments that I have power over.
You know how like when we do these kind of podcasty things, we like sort of plan what we're going to say so that we can like say the things so that the listeners can can hear them. Mm-hmm. Can I ask you something that we haven't planned at all?
Please.
And I actually don't know the answer to this question. So we do a lot of talking to each other. So usually I sort of am like, oh, let me tee you up. You are a strong and accomplished woman in business. You go out and one of the things you're literally the best in the world that I've ever seen is running a meeting with a welcoming but also firm, get stuff done approach, right? Like, and you do this with some of the biggest CEOs in the world. Like,
okay, I'll accept the setup. What's the question?
So, and also you're a little bit allergic to most of the like women in the workplace sort of stuff, right? Just like
I am.
Right. And you have a daughter and you want her to grow up to be successful, however she defines that. And I know you're open to a lot of opportunities for her. How do you think about setting your daughter up to be confident and successful in the next step of her life? Like actually it's like 12 steps later. It's like, but you know, when she finally leaves the Van Meerten nest.
Well, I think my off-the-cuff answer is that she's going to need a lot of powerful relationships. That's what I needed. And I don't know very many people who have launched successful adulthoods without some significantly good relationships. They don't have to be mentors specifically or friends specifically or well-networked anything. But I think that it would be really hard for her to build a life that she wants to live in without having some powerful relationships that are maybe sort of fractional mentor, fractional friend, fractional family. I don't know. But those those epic relationships that have formed my life, where people know me really well, really care about me, have a high standard for me, and respect my autonomy. The relationships that have guided my life in that way came from summer camp. So I met those people at camp. I worked with them at camp, and I learned who I was by working with them in an environment that scaffolds social nuance, that scaffolds relationships, along with scaffolding some, I guess, ethics, work ethics, certainly. So I guess one of the other reasons I send her is because I hope that she learns to make relationships in that way. Whether or not she pulls her friends from that group, I want her to watch people form those relationships and then stay in them, stay loyal to them, stay flexible in them throughout the lifespan, because that has been such an impactful part of my life.
It's I'm thinking of this right now, but you said that immersive experiences have really changed who you are, and it made me think about like how it's like cool to go to Japan right now, like like Japan,
right?
Like, it's like Japan is like the cool place to go right now, and all the people I know that have been to Japan, including you, have come back and told these stories about how the culture there, the hidden curriculum there, is different in a variety of different ways. And what you're making me think is like, and I've traveled and whatever, but what you're making me think of is like going to summer camp is like the relationship version of going to another country.
So true and so well put.
Like the healthy relationship version. It's like you get to see what it's like to build connection, to see other people building connections in these different ways. And not every camp is the same, and you've got to pick your camp based on all million different things. But it's interesting to think about like that. I've never heard people selling camp like that. They're not like, this is, basically you drop into a new world. It's like, and like, but that's what it's like.
Well, and now that culturally, I mean, globally, culturally, we're moving towards including a little more EQ, we kind of went a little over the top, my opinion, but including a little more authenticity, a little more EQ in the normal way that we conduct business. I think it makes more sense that we would almost have emotional countries to visit or sort of define our microcosms in different ways. Obviously our nation's geographically pretty big, and so we aren't visiting different countries, but we do have pockets of cultures, and we make pockets of cultures, and we're getting better at that as a species. One of the ways that I've heard you talk about camp as those microcosms, I guess, is around the idea of decision making, that one of the things kids are immersing themselves in at camp is new styles of decision making. They're watching the staff, they're watching the structures already in place. Will you tell me a little bit more about that? How does decision-making play into the camp culture? Like, why did that get important for you and all the camps that you've created?
So you and I do a lot of work with business leaders outside of camp, right? That's your business, and you bring me in, and I help you with those kind of things. We run peer groups and those kind of things. And what has become true for me in those coaching practices that I've seen with you and in the peer groups is that all of those conversations that we have, when a CEO is stressed about whatever and trying to figure things out, what they're trying to do is figure out how to make a decision. And they're trying to figure out how to make a decision without complete information.
Always.
Because if you have complete information, you're playing checkers.
Someone else below you would have made the decision.
Right. And so the world, I believe, is moving in a direction that will have more people in those kind of roles, right? Because AI is going to, and we don't have to make this a whole AI podcast, but the reality is that AI is going to take most of the tasks away. And if we have complete information, it's going to be able to give pretty good recommendations on what to do most of the time, right? And so I think decision-making is going to continue to be even more important, and potentially the most important skill that our kids will need going into the future, right? It's important now, and I believe it will continue to become even more important. And kids spend most of their time sitting at a desk being told what to do. And this is not a school bashing podcast. This is a reality of what happens for most kids most of the time. Their lives are designed around basically being told what to do with a few decisions. And then all of a sudden they turn 18 and it's like, okay, now do you want to spend tons of money going off to college? Do you want to take a gap year? Like it's all of a sudden it's like, you haven't made very many decisions in your life. Do you want to make huge ones?
I know. And they have to make them, if the first day, you always have this great quote that I might try to butcher here, where you say that you don't want the first day that your kid has to make a lot of decisions about how to spend their time to be the first day they wake up at college and you're not there to help.
Right? Like, because we all wake up someday and no one tells us what to do. And that's sometimes it's the first day of college, and sometimes it's sometimes you go through college being told what to do most of the time, right? And so I think this decision making is the number one skill that I try to get better at every day, and believe that kids are need to get better at. And we get better at stuff by doing it, right? We get better at making decisions by making them.
Absolutely.
And so one of the best parts about camp is the stakes for the decisions in the grand scheme of things are incredibly low. It's like, did I go to archery or canoeing? Did I choose to sit next to Sarah or Jimmy? Did I go to the activity with my closest friend because she wanted to? Or did I go to the activity I wanted to go to because I was excited about the activity? Now, I can't tell you the best way to do that for you, but what I can do is help build the sandbox so that you can practice those decisions. That's what camp does. I think it's actually the best place on the planet for this, because it gives kids an opportunity to make a decision, then see the impact of their decision. And the stakes are low. Again, everything is safe. It's like the best part of what we did when we went out and played until the streetlights came on and came home, except that there's these cool mentors, because the next step is decision, then impact of the decision. And then there's usually some form of reflection built into the day at camp, whether it's the end of the day or you cry and you sit on a bench and you like figure it out.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not encouraging kids to cry and sit on a bench. I'm saying the stakes, again, they matter to that kid, and I want to be real with them and sit with them in some of their feelings. But like, no one got really hurt because we raised the safety floor, so everything is safe. And also inside of that reflection is awesome mentorship. There are adults who care about you, they're 18, 19, and 36-year-olds like me, but they're adults that care about you. So then there's mentorship, and then there's learning. So it's like we have this feedback loop that's constantly spinning at camp. That's choice, impact, mentorship, and reflection, learning, again, new choice. And we spin it all day long through everything at camp. And what's even better is that everyone loves the learning. It's like ice cream, but if it was good for you. Because it's not boring, it's fun, it's wrapped up in all of these awesome things. And that is something that I don't always know how to explain, which is like, I have this belief, and I try to fight it all the time, that learning should be hard, that's what school teaches us. And it doesn't have to be.
Like, if you're not sweating and squinting your mind as hard as possible, it's way too easy. You should be doing harder things.
Right? Like, that's how I feel.
I know. I feel like that's the story I tell myself too.
But like, it's not true.
It's not true.
It's like the best exercise is also usually like fun. It's like, go play soccer.
I can play basketball for 3 hours. And if I have to go for a 20-minute run with no headphones, impossible.
Right? And camp is like that. Camp is literally playing basketball. And you're learning in all those moments with people who care about you. Anyway, so I think decision making is the number one skill of the future, and camp is basically a decision making academy. But instead of being like taking notes and reading books about it, you're like loving your life.
Yeah, it's a completely immersive, lived experience situation. And you, in the camps that we've worked at together, you and I found that we shared an obsession with staff training, staff development, staff mentorship. And that makes sense because they do all the things, just like we said, I'm going to sit all year round and have big ideas, but they're the ones that actually do it. Just like the employees of any company are the ones actually doing the thing. At camp, what have you found to be some of the techniques that help the staff? And I know we're talking about them like they're adults, but like you mentioned, they're 18, 19, 20. Sometimes the like really mature ones are 24. How do you get all of this like somewhat edgy information about child development into their minds and into the like practice of camp? Do they have to know it all? How does the program support it? Talk to me about that.
Well, first of all, I'm a millennial. We were the worst. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I've talked to some Gen X folks. I heard they were the worst. Certainly boomers were the worst. And now, right now, Gen Z, they're the worst. Alpha will be the worst eventually.
Yeah,
Just so
I
you know.
totally agree. And hopefully it will just continue to get worse because the older I get, the more I like feeling like, no, these guys are really the worst.
It's why I get it. Young people, we make mistakes, But like, we love to throw the current generation under the bus. That's what
We
happens.
do. It's so
right?
comforting.
And then what happens is they get to camp and they are literally the most responsible humans on the planet. And
I know.
they work 24 hours a day and
they shine. Their big hearts and big brains just shine. The kids just idolize them instantly.
And so I want to first of all say that the huge majority of it is that we hire incredible 18 to 22-year-olds to be awesome.
And the awesome ones want to come to camp.
And they want to come to camp. They want to work hard. They want to work hard. They want to care. They want to connect. It's so fun. Like, it's all the things that we talked about. And we've got to fight a little bit with like, is it good for your career and all that kind of stuff. And there's,
Sure.
We can talk about that. But mostly the trick is find awesome people and create a culture where awesome stuff happens. Then there's all kind of techniques. But the first step is give awesome people space to be awesome. And mostly that's the big hurdle. And camp is the best place for that.
I just want to revisit that idea. Get the awesome people and make space for them to be awesome. Pretty much sums up everyone's recruiting strategy.
And one of the great parts about camp is you're actually recruiting for like a short chunk. So you can get people to be awesome. And the feedback loop is pretty quick. You know, it's like if you hire somebody awesome to work at your company, it's a lot of work to make it so they don't work at your company anymore.
Yep.
If they end up not being awesome, right? At camp, it's like pretty quick. They come for the summer. And so you're building this culture that quickly builds more and more awesome people, attracts more and more awesome people. And the best camps, what they have is a feedback loop where you're awesome and you come to camp and you tell your friends about how awesome camp is.
Yes.
And then they come to camp.
That makes me think about something I've been wanting to ask you about that, again, I have not prepped. We have not prepped for.
God.
Story of our lives, Jack. So I want to ask you about mediocrity because I know you pretty much hate it. You're bored by it. You accept it as a like necessary evil, but you'd prefer to just step over it and pretend it's not there or eliminate it. And in camping, the short time frame for like it's so iterative. Can you talk about how you think about mediocrity at camp and how if I'm like I was talking about why I send my daughter to camp, and I think I don't want to send her to a mediocre camp. I think that's highly possible. In fact, probable. If I just go on the internet, every camp website is like, we're great, which makes me think they're all mediocre. So how do you tell if a camp is mediocre or great? And then how do you make a camp that you're involved with be great? Because you haven't run any mediocre camps. And I say that as someone who's seen a lot of camps. And none of yours are mediocre. How can you tell the difference and how do you do that?
Well, so first I want to give camp a credit in general to the idea of summer camp is the system is pretty good to create great relationships, to be healthy. Like the idea of camp is just the bar starts so much higher.
That's true, which is why they can look exactly the same as they did in the 30s still today because it was already a great idea.
And so going to camp is most camps are already quite good, right? Just because it is kids spending time with other kids in the woods. We've broken the monopoly of college age students being able to spend time with young people. All these things that is an unfair advantage that camp has that almost nowhere else on the planet has. So already camps tend to be a great place. I just want to make sure that is clear. Now, you have to make sure the camp is safe. If you're choosing where to send your daughter, you've got to make sure the camp is safe. How do you do that?
Other parent recommendation.
What you're not going to do is go through their state regulations. Like every state has different regulations. The ACA has American Camp Association.
Certainly, I've never done that with any camp. Looked up their regs and then compared it to the state regs to see if they're meeting it. No.
And that is not how most people are going to do that. So what I would look for to figure out if the camp is safe is really three things. One is, do their digital assets, does the stuff they put out on the internet look like they put thought and care into it, right? And that's the first place you're going to start is their website, their social media, that kind of stuff. Like, did they care enough to make that stuff approachable and thoughtful and engaging? Second thing, like you said, is can I talk to some other families that have gone to the camp, that love the camp, those kind of things. So you're going to read reviews on the internet. Everything starts on the internet. Like, as much as
Sure.
I'm an in-person person, I love camp because it's in person. It all starts on the internet. But then, ask the camp director, can I speak with a parent who already sent their kid to camp? Like, can I talk with some alumni? How can you get in touch with some people who can tell you for real and the real version of this? Because every camp is a little different, right? And then the last part is, and this is the most important part, is who runs the camp. And do you think that person is inspirational for your child in a way that you want your child to be inspired by?
I love that. If the people who run the camp are inspired in a way that I want my kid, are inspiring in a way I want my kid to be inspired.
Because it's very, very likely that the person who runs the camp's inspirational level is going to trickle into the rest of everything that's happening, right? So do you want
Like
Greta,
any business.
Yeah, just like any business. So do you want Greta to spend time, your daughter, with a bunch of people who are directionally thinking the same way and caring the same way and excited and those kind of things? Now, what that's going to look like for each person is different, right? So like I am probably a little bit more grounded, a little bit less focused on like perfect SAT scores, a little bit more like energetic and silly than some other camp directors you might find. I have friends that are, that run great camps that are like more buttoned up. Maybe they're great sports, all those kind of things, right? So there's plenty of inspirational people that run really great camps. Meet the people that are in charge. If you're inspired by them and you think your kids will be inspired by them, it's very likely that that's the camp for you. And that makes my job challenging because it's like, now I have to go figure out what does inspirational mean and how do I keep all the operational stuff on track? But that's the job of every CEO. That's the job of every person who runs any business, is be inspiring in some way and make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Yes. And the way you say that makes it sound like anyone who would run a youth organization or any human-based organization would think about it that way, but they really don't. Like if you're lucky enough to be able to choose a school for your kid, a lot of times we're looking at the curriculum and the values and the everything. And yet, if there's somebody in charge who the way they manifest those things doesn't match how I would like them to be manifested, then it doesn't matter that the website says all the words I care about. And so I think what you're saying, and then there's many organizations that just don't do it at all. Like a public school isn't necessarily doing that because they're not entirely supposed to be doing that. And a camp, I think in some ways it's almost more important at camp because the curriculum isn't academic and it's less checkboxable, the curriculum at camp, partly because we haven't codified the emotional curriculum for anyone. But camp is the leading edge of that. And I'm excited to see the way that you in particular bring that vibe. How do we bring that high emotion, high motivation part to the camps that you run? Overall, would you say, Jack, what is it about you in particular that made you take this career track? Like you're someone who could take your enthusiasm, your energy, your intellect, your engineering background, your business background, and you can make almost any business you do successful. You know, we talk about that a lot. We could buy a sticker company and crush it. You could buy a laundromat and crush it. You could, probably buy a hobby shop. Who cares what? You would crush it. What is it about camp? Why do you want to crush it at camp, I guess? Why does that feel like you want to knock it out of the park there in particular?
Well, first of all, thanks for saying nice things about me.
Oh, shucks.
Your mom taught me that. She taught your daughter actually that when you get a compliment, you have two choices. And your mom is like this awesome Midwest mom. And I'll answer your question in a second. But I heard your daughter get a compliment about something she had drawn, and someone said like, "I love your drawing," and Greta was like, "Oh, it's not that good. It's not that good." And your mom just interrupted her. And your mom is just like you. She's firm but kind, And she said, "Greta, when someone gives you a compliment, you have two choices. You can either say, 'Thank you,' or 'Aw, shucks.'" And so I haven't really pulled off "Aw, shucks" that often, unless I can do that whole story so that then I can say, "Aw, shucks."
But the end of that story is that if you choose anything beyond some version of "thank you" or "aw shucks," what you're really doing is just prolonging the compliment window. Because if you push back on the compliment, according to Grand Jan, then they have to say more and more and more of them until eventually you're even more embarrassed to say your "thank you" or your "aw shucks." So really, if you're embarrassed about the compliments, the "aw shucks" or the "thanks" is the quickest duck out from the situation.
Yeah. And I just told you I'm trying to be better at making decisions, and a decision that I've made is to follow Grand Jan's advice and share that story with kids as they think about what that can look like. Why do I care about camp? Why do I choose to spend my time thinking about camp? It feels good. I mean, I'm going to give you the longer answer too, but for me, it feels so good. I love being at camp. It's all of those things that it is for kids. It's inspirational, and it's a community, and it's the place where I learn the most every year. For me, I love being there.
Me too.
I love the experience.
It changes my life every year, even now.
Yeah, and so I'm going to tell you why I care about it because of the other impact. Because I think about the world through a very self-determination theory lens, right? So self-determination theory is this idea that people are motivated and happy when their physical and psychological needs are met. Physical needs, you understand. Psychological needs, according to Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, who these guys from the University of Rochester who built this whole thing up, are autonomy, belonging, and competence, right? So when we feel choiceful, when we feel like the people around us care about us and we care about them, and when we feel like the choices that we make matter, then we continue to be more creative. We continue to be more engaged and thoughtful and those kind of things, right? And so, of course, camp does this for kids. Everything that we do at camp is through the lens of how can it be through this self-determination lens where kids are choiceful. And not that means that they get to choose every single thing, right? I want to fly to Hawaii, but I don't want to go through TSA. I'm going to choose to go through TSA because it's worth it for me to get to the other things. And kids make those choices all the time, right? It's worth it to listen to the rules at archery to be able to do archery because it's needed for archery to happen, right? So it's not that I don't mean choiceful, we just choose everything all the time, Lord of the Flies. It is just that we choose to go through something to get something else often. That's what we do in life. And then, so belonging, very clearly camp is a place that supports belonging. And we do a ton of work to make this happen. And you asked about staff, staff are a big part of that. How do the staff support the kids to create this sense of belonging? And how do we make the staff feel like they belong so that it's like the kids are just coming a little bit later to this awesome party that is also educational and thoughtful and all these other things. And then competence, there's a lot of different ways to think about this at camp. For me, competence is focusing on skills like decision-making, creativity, collaboration. These are the skills that I believe are the most important to get better at for the future. And not just I believe, this is what, it's the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. There's all these.
It matches all the most recent childhood research.
Yeah, this is what Google needs. This is what Google needs. This is what OpenAI needs. This is what they all need. And anyway, But why do I care? Is because for me, I get to live in that environment where the choices that I make matter, that I'm in a community of people that matter, and that hopefully the impact of me building a space like that and then participating fully in that space is inspiring for the next generation of kids who are going to go out and make more of these choices to build a more self-determined world where more people feel like they have the ability to make choices, where they feel like they belong, where they feel like the choices that they make matter. Because there's an incredible lack of purpose among so many people today. Like I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I get to wake up every day and care about what I do and believe that the choices I make matter. That feedback is like, oh my gosh, I have purpose. I matter to the world, right? With people like you and my family and so many other people that care about me. And I'm lucky enough to be able to choose most of what I do most of the time, right? So incredible for me. I love that. I hope that camp is a small ripple to let more and more kids have more and more opportunities to live the version of their self-determined life that lets them do that. And what is that going to look like? It looks different for you, right? Like you and I love each other so much. We care about each other so much. Like I come to Thanksgiving, I go, you know what I mean? Like
yeah, we're family. We have become friend family.
And the choices you make are different than the choices that I make. Awesome. Because you're also getting to wake up every day with purpose, with community, with choice. And so I want more kids to have that opportunity. I want more kids to be able to grow up and have that, but also get to I don't believe that you can just wait. Like I don't think that I might be willing to do this if I believed that it would work, where it was a sort of study hard, only focus on keeping your head down, and then eventually there's a payoff that is a more self-determined life. But I think there's a misquote to Gandhi that there's no path to peace. Peace is the path, right? Like I don't think that there's like you got to get reps on this. You don't get to run a marathon because you just wake up and run a marathon. You got to go run a mile and get off the couch and buy the sneakers. And so
dang it, get off the couch. I
know.
Well, I like how you've centered that on the choice and autonomy piece, because I do think that in all of the businesses that I've run since being a summer camp counselor or summer camp director or owner, each one of them is better because I did that, because I was in an environment where I could be choiceful and valued, and where the way that we are to each other matters, but it doesn't fake matter. It matters because that's the whole project. And so every business I've done has been better because of that. And not better because I threw water balloons or wore a silly costume, but better because I felt brave to be silly and to try something new, or better because somebody helped me when I didn't think that they would, or that I deserved it, or whatever. Those formative lessons changed everything about the way that I run stuff. So I agree. And
camp has this hard, it has a branding hurdle. Is in China, they call camp education. Like the word for camp is camp education, because their school system is so focused on outcomes. They're sort of better at the school system that we say we want in some ways. But because our school system still has some room for all of this creativity and innovation just in the cracks, we still create the most innovative companies in the world in the U.S. and that kind of thing.
Sure.
So, but they call it camp education in China. In some ways, I think to push back against this problem that camp has, which is we don't believe that fun should be so good for you. We as maybe it's a Puritan work ethic, or right. I don't know what it is about our. And I've read a lot of stuff with theories on this, but we don't believe that play should be good for you. We don't.
You're right. The whole industry kind of has a stigma, like it's childish.
Yeah, and awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Childish.
prefer childlike.
We prefer childlike. Thank you. We prefer fun.
But like, and I get it. Except like, the play is, Peter Gray says play isn't recess from education. Play is education. And, that's not what the world looks like for most kids most of the time. And so if camp is the only place that we can have this old neighborhood style, but instead of just being an old neighborhood, there's also awesome tennis and swimming and basketball and incredible mentors. It's like, it's the absolute level up, and it's hard to, I sit with the business leaders that you send me to go talk to. Right?
Yes.
Like, you're like, all right, Jack, I need you to go to this manufacturing company and help their executive team work through a problem. You send me there. This is a real story of things that happen. You send me there.
Yes.
And I go in and have to do so much weird container building to be able to say out loud that I run summer camp with that group, because I'm afraid. And I care about this, and I'm impassioned about it, and I'll look into the camera and tell you that summer camp is the most important thing on the planet. I'm afraid that if I go in there and say that I run summer camp, they won't take it seriously.
Yeah. And a lot of times you're right to worry about that, because they wouldn't. And I do hope that gets changed, because having run summer camps, it is not a joke of a business. Like, you've got hundreds of other people's kids there. So that alone makes it, somebody needs to take it seriously. But I agree with you. And I guess thinking about what you said about outcomes is making me hope that maybe there's a chance that the way that you're thinking about summer camp and measuring different outcomes, that we could all edge closer towards having those outcomes become more of the common benchmarks or lexicon around the emotional intelligence or social nuance that we know is how the work gets done once you're an adult and you're working in a company. Is it doesn't matter if you know everything about physics that there is to know. If you're a total jerk at work, the project is not coming to completion. And so, as expert as anyone could be in the content of work, of school, if they don't have the social piece to go with it, their life becomes more limited. Their choices are more limited. And they're more dependent on other people noticing their value instead of finding environments where they can insert value. And I think that would be so disappointing. So I guess to close, I'd like to hear this is, Jack, where do you think the most value comes out of summer camp for the camper? So I'm a camper, I'm coming to your camp. What do you think is the most valuable potential part of that experience? Not just for me, but for everyone.
Summer camp is the business of change. It is, you come in as Jack 1.0 or even 2.0 or 12.0, and you leave as Jack 16.0, right? And what happens in that black box is, in the camp world, everyone likes to talk about like camp magic. And it's our job as camp directors to get on podcasts like this and to try to explain what happens in that black box. And it's challenging because camp is the business of change. And what change looks like for me when I come to camp is inherently and importantly different than what it looks like for you. However, we can draw some lines, because that's like the consultant answer. That's like, it depends, which I know you like to say. And so what happens in that black box? What does the change look like? What I hope that it looks like is that kids come in and they get to step into the immersive environment that is a different world, where they can be inspired to believe that more is possible for them. And you don't know that you're living at a 4 until you experience what a 12 looks like, right? You don't know that you're not as good at basketball as LeBron if you only ever play with the kids in your neighborhood. And so coming to camp, you get to see what is possible with people that are just a little bit older than you or just a little bit different from you in whatever way, right? So like I think about in my life, I've learned so much from you, right? You're a really good friend of mine. And in many ways, you're like a little ahead of me on a handful of things, right? And maybe I'm a little ahead of you on a handful of other things, but like I get to learn from you because you're a little ahead of me. And at camp, that's what happens because camp has this opportunity. Its unfair advantage is these exceptional, thoughtful 18-year-olds that 9-year-olds get to look up to. And it's different. I try to be cool. I'm so much less cool now than I was at 18.
Same.
Like the pink hat that I wore backwards and the long hair, for some reason, 8-year-olds were like, that guy's so cool. And now they're like, no, that guy's pretty cool. I'm still like pretty cool, but I'm not like 18.
I'm not cool anymore.
I'm not 18-year-old Jack cool. Okay. And I'm getting less cool every day. And that's okay because what camp does is create a space for kids to see what's inspirational and relatable, right? Because even more important than that, because there's other people that are inspirational, right? Like Taylor Swift or whatever, these people that kids might look up to. At camp, Taylor Swift is actually just like Taylor Smith, and she's your daughter's counselor who does sing at the music festival that camp puts on, and it's incredible, and everyone cheers, and it's amazing. But then when your daughter is homesick later that night, Taylor Smith is sitting with her and helping her through that problem. And that inspiration and relatability is what I think creates the opportunity for growth for kids, right? And so it's not that I hope that Greta comes to camp and gets exactly the same things that I got out of camp. It's that I hope that Greta comes to camp and has as many opportunities for real change for her to happen so that she can be stronger and more confident and more thoughtful in these ways that are going to happen for her.
Yeah, like a seismic shift. She's safe enough to make a seismic shift there.
And it takes time. It takes time. Like we sell camp as like, come for a summer and experience it. Honestly, like for me and you, it's taken years of camp. It took going to camp as kids for 7-8 summers.
But it changes my life every time. And cumulatively, it's set me on an entirely different path.
And I don't think there's quick fixes in the world for almost anything. It's like, you know what I mean? Like if you want to run a marathon again, it's like you go on one run. And that's the start of building a habit. And going to camp is the start of building a habit to see the world a little bit differently, to go and get the recharge for the next year. And for me, I'm addicted, and I'll be back every summer for the rest of my life. You know, I tried to get out of the camp world for a while. I lived in my business costume, and now I put on my business costume for some business things, and then I get to go back and wear tie-dye and stand on picnic tables and jump in the lake, and I love it.
And work at the healthiest place in the world.
And work at the healthiest place in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.